3 hours ago, Mercedes looked unstoppable. A rookie on pole, a front row lockout, and a car that looked almost half a second faster than everyone else. But then something changed. Engineers from rival teams began analyzing the telemetry from qualifying in Shanghai, and what they found raised serious questions because the Mercedes engine appears to deploy electrical power longer than the regulations should allow. Longer acceleration, smoother power delivery, and a massive advantage exactly where the new 2026 engine rules are supposed to limit everyone. That single detail has now triggered deeper scrutiny inside the paddock. And according to several reports, the FIA has begun taking a closer look at the Mercedes power unit. If the data confirms what some teams believe they are seeing, Mercedes could be facing the first major technical controversy of the new Formula One era. And the timing could not be more dramatic because just hours ago in China, a 19-year-old rookie shocked the world. Kimi Antonelli delivered a historic lap, the youngest pole position in Formula One history with George Russell right behind him. A perfect result for Mercedes, or at least it looked perfect until engineers opened the data. Because hidden inside that pole lap may be the detail that explains why the Mercedes suddenly looks untouchable. And if the FIA decides that detail crosses the line, the entire championship fight could change before the season has even truly begun. So before we break down the telemetry, the investigation, and what really happened in qualifying at the Chinese Grand Prix, make sure you subscribe to the channel, because this story is only just beginning. Just a few hours ago, the Chinese Grand Prix qualifying session delivered one of the most dramatic moments of the young 2026 season. The headlines looked simple at first: Mercedes domination, a rookie on pole, and a front row lockout that immediately sent a message to the rest of the grid. But inside the paddock, the reaction was more complicated. Because while fans celebrated the incredible lap from Kimi Antonelli, engineers across Formula One were already studying something else. The data and the numbers from that session are exactly what started the entire conversation. To understand why, we need to go back to the start of qualifying in Shanghai. From the very first minutes of the session, Mercedes looked extremely comfortable. The W17 did not struggle to warm the tires. It did not look nervous through the long opening corner. And most importantly, it behaved very predictably in every phase of the lap. George Russell set the early benchmark in Q1. The lap was clean, precise, and fast enough to immediately place Mercedes at the top of the timing screens. But what surprised many observers was how easily the car produced that pace. Russell did not appear to be pushing the absolute limit. There was no dramatic sliding, no aggressive corrections, just a smooth, controlled lap. Then Kimi Antonelli crossed the line and suddenly the gap between the two Mercedes drivers looked almost non-existent. The rookie was right there, matching Russell sector after sector. For many people watching, that was the first big story of the session. A 19-year-old driver only at the beginning of his Formula One career, already operating at the same level as a race winner and championship contender. But inside the garages of other teams, something else stood out. The Mercedes looked incredibly stable under braking. Shanghai is a circuit that punishes instability, especially in the first sector. Turn 1 alone is a nightmare for drivers, a long spiral corner that tightens constantly. You enter at high speed, then the radius slowly closes, forcing the car to rotate while the tires are under enormous pressure. If the front end loses grip, the car slides wide. If the rear becomes unstable, the driver loses confidence instantly. Yet the Mercedes handled that corner beautifully. Russell attacked the entry with confidence. Antonelli did exactly the same, and the car remained planted. But even that was not the detail that really caught attention. The real difference appeared later in the lap. In the final sector, the part of the Shanghai circuit that includes one of the longest straights in all of Formula One. This straight is where the new engine regulations reveal their true impact. Under the 2026 power unit rules, electrical energy deployment is limited. Every car has a restricted amount of energy that can be released each lap. Once that energy runs out, the electrical boost fades, acceleration drops, and the car begins to rely mainly on the internal combustion engine. Engineers call this moment derating. It happens to every team. Ferrari experiences it, McLaren experiences it, Red Bull certainly experiences it, And it usually happens in the same place on this circuit near the end of the long back straight. But during qualifying today, the Mercedes behaved differently. When Russell exited the final corner and launched onto the straight, the acceleration looked extremely strong. That part was expected. The W17 clearly has a powerful engine, but what happened next started to raise eyebrows. Instead of losing electrical boost early in the straight, the Mercedes continued accelerating at a higher rate. The drop in power came later, much later. Then Antonelli repeated the exact same pattern. Corner exit, full throttle, and the car continued pulling down the straight longer than most of its rivals. At first, this looked like a small detail. But in Formula One, small details become massive advantages, because if a car maintains electrical deployment just a little longer, the result is several tenths of a second gained before the braking zone. And in a qualifying session where the gaps are usually measured in hundreds, that difference becomes enormous. By the time Q2 finished, engineers in multiple garages had already started comparing the telemetry traces, speed graphs, energy deployment curves, acceleration patterns. And when those graphs were placed side by side, the same question began appearing again and again. Why does the Mercedes maintain electrical boost longer? At that moment, nobody had an answer. But the curiosity inside the paddock was growing quickly. Then came Q3, the final shootout for pole position. Russell looked ready to take control of the session. His first run was incredibly quick. The first sector was purple, the second sector almost perfect, but a small issue during the lap forced him to abort the attempt. He returned to the garage and suddenly the responsibility shifted entirely to Antonelli, the rookie, the youngest driver in the field. One final lap, one opportunity, one chance to attack the fastest circuit conditions of the day. And what happened next is the moment that changed everything. The final minutes of qualifying in Shanghai felt almost unreal. The track was improving with every lap. Grip was rising, temperatures were perfect, and every driver knew this was the moment where pole position would be decided. Inside the Mercedes garage, the situation was suddenly tense. George Russell had just aborted what looked like a potential pole lap. A small technical issue forced him to return to the pits. That meant everything now depended on the other car. The rookie Kimi Antonelli, 19 years old, second race weekend of the season, and suddenly the responsibility of delivering pole position for Mercedes was on his shoulders. Most drivers in that situation would play it safe. Secure a front row start. Avoid pushing too close to the limit. But Antonelli did the opposite. He attacked from the very first corner. The commitment was obvious. He threw the car into the long opening spiral of turn 1 with incredible confidence. The Mercedes rotated beautifully. No hesitation, no correction, just a clean, aggressive entry that carried massive speed through the tightening radius. The first sector time appeared on the screen. Green, very fast, but still not the fastest. Ferrari was still close. McLaren was still within reach. The pole position was far from guaranteed. Then Antonelli entered the technical middle section of the circuit. This is the part of the track where precision matters more than bravery. Short braking zones, quick direction changes, the kind of corners where one small mistake can destroy an entire lap. But the Mercedes looked perfectly balanced. The front end responded instantly. The rear remained stable under acceleration. Antonelli placed the car exactly where it needed to be. Corner after corner, the second sector time appeared, even faster. Now, the entire paddock began to pay attention because the lap was becoming something special. But the most important part of the circuit was still ahead. Sector 3, the section that contains the famous Shanghai back straight. And the moment Antonelli exited the final corner, everything about this story changed. The Mercedes launched forward with incredible traction. The rear tires hooked up immediately. No wheel spin, no hesitation, just pure acceleration. The car shot onto the straight like a missile. The speed numbers on the timing tower began climbing rapidly. 300 km/h, 310, 320, and the car was still pulling. For a brief moment, the onboard camera showed something unusual. The acceleration simply did not fade. Normally, at this point on the straight, the electrical energy deployment begins to run out. The car loses that extra boost. Acceleration becomes weaker. But the Mercedes kept pushing meter after meter, still accelerating, still gaining speed. And by the time Antonelli reached the braking zone, the lap time advantage had grown dramatically. He crossed the line 1 minute 32. Pole position, the youngest pole sitter in the history of Formula One. Inside the Mercedes garage, the celebration was immediate. Mechanics jumped from their seats. Engineers applauded. Toto Wolff smiled. It looked like the perfect moment for the team. A rookie delivering history, a front-row lockout, and another clear signal that Mercedes might currently have the fastest car in the championship. But only minutes later, while the celebrations were still happening in one garage, something very different was happening in the others. Engineers from rival teams were already downloading the telemetry from that pole lap. And when they began analyzing the acceleration data from the final sector, the same strange pattern appeared again. The Mercedes power unit was maintaining electrical deployment longer than expected, longer than Ferrari, longer than McLaren, and much longer than Red Bull. At first, some believed it was simply a perfect lap, a flawless corner exit, better traction, better aerodynamics, but the data suggested something deeper because the exact same acceleration behavior appeared earlier in the session. Russell showed it in Q2. Antonelli showed it again in Q3. The same signature, the same smooth deployment curve, the same delay drop in electrical boost. And that is the moment when engineers inside several teams began asking the same quiet question. How is the Mercedes doing that? Because under the current power unit regulations, electrical energy deployment is one of the most strictly monitored systems in Formula One. Every team has the same limits, the same restrictions, the same amount of energy allowed per lap. Which means if one car is able to deploy electrical power longer than the others, there must be a reason. And that question is exactly what has now caught the attention of the FIA. Because when something unusual appears consistently in the data, Formula One does not ignore it. It investigates. And tonight in the Shanghai paddock, the investigation may already be beginning.